Series over at the law school, together with Pedro, the Latino leadership group here at the School of Management. Barbara Santiago, I don't think she made it. We've been working with her from the Brazilian Undergraduate Students Association. We've been working all year to put together some interesting events, and we're very lucky that because of a visit to Harvard, Mr. Dallagnol made a trip down to New Haven. I'm going to keep introductions extremely brief. We're going to be moderated today by Andrea Katz, who's been really active in our Latin American program. She's a joint JD and political science PhD student. She's going to introduce our speaker. We're going to try to keep things as brief as possible so that we have as much time for questions as possible. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much all for being here. It's super exciting to have such a turnout. Not that we were surprised about the turnout. Mr. Deltan Dallagnol, the lead prosecutor in Brazil's biggest corruption investigation in history, obviously needs no introduction among this crowd, so I will keep these remarks very brief. Mr. Dallagnol has been a federal prosecutor in Brazil since 2002, when he entered the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office of Paraná at the age of 22. He has a degree in law from the Federal University of Paraná and an LLM from our neighboring law school to the north, Harvard Law School. Mr. Dallagnol is currently the head of Lava Jato, named after the roadside car wash at which it began. Since its apparently unremarkable beginnings, the investigation has uncovered nationwide corruption at the state oil company Petrobras, which was being used to channel campaign funds to most of the main political parties. Sums involved so far reach up to $6 billion, and this may be just the tip of the iceberg. The investigation has since widened to include the construction industry, Swiss bank accounts, a Dutch offshore drilling platform builder, and investment projects in Peru, Venezuela, Argentina, possibly more. The individuals charged so far in Lava Jato represent a veritable who's who of the Brazilian political and economic elite, including the heads of some of Brazil's largest private firms, dozens of senators and deputies in all of Brazil's major parties, with almost 1/3 of the 594 members of Brazil's Congress under scrutiny over potential involvement, and now including even the former president of the nation, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. That a seemingly small investigation into a money laundering scheme at a local car wash, headed by 11 prosecutors and 50 staff members, could have bloomed into the political cataclysm that it is today, would have seemed far-fetched a few years ago. But it would be difficult to overstate the importance and significance of Lava Jato for most Brazilians today. For many Brazilians, Mr. Dallagnol is nothing less than a national hero, reminding the country that its institutions are functioning effectively and that justice is being applied equally, even to the wealthy and the powerful. The case has become a force of change against a backdrop of stagnation and politicking. Critics, on the other hand, have said that in a time of economic downturn, Lava Jato has worsened the economic burden on industry. Others have claimed that the investigation has become politicized, reserving the harshest scrutiny for members of the PT, the party of Lula and current President Dilma Rousseff. And others suggest that the public prosecutor and the judiciary may have too much independence, pointing to specific acts such as a federal judge holding defendants in jail to extract plea agreements, which is uncommon, to say the least, in the Brazilian legal system, or the recent hasty and possibly illegal release of recordings obtained in a court-ordered wiretap of conversations between President Lula and Dilma Rousseff, former President Lula and current President Dilma Rousseff, as evidence of procedural violations by the prosecutors. Last fall, Mr. Dallagnol and his office unveiled a list of 10 measures to prevent and punish corruption, which have been presented to the Congress. Mr. Dallagnol will be speaking about some of these today and about the broader significance of Lava Jato, an event of historic importance in overturning decades of impunity in a political system in which, as Mr. Dallagnol himself has said, corruption has spread like a cancer. I know we're all excited to hear from Mr. Dallagnol, so I will now turn it over to him.
Thank you for the warrant presentation. It's an honor for me to be here with you. I studied at Harvard, but I was impressed when I arrived here with the beauty of the city, with the beauty of the campus. Am I being recorded?
Yes.
Oh, that's a pity because I'm worried that in Harvard they may cancel my graduation certificate if they hear that. So,
We can erase that out.
okay, please erase that. Wiretapping leaking is a problem in Brazil. So. I am a federal prosecutor in Brazil. We enter in the career through a public contest. I'm not politically appointed. I have no history of political involvement. I don't have a political ambition. And all my colleagues who work in the case have the same condition. We never had any kind of political involvement. We may have one or other kind of political preference, but that is completely irrelevant to the role that we have there in this case. We began this investigation investigating financial crimes, basically crimes committed by money laundering agents. They are foreign exchange dealers. It's well known in the world, these kind of operations, halal operations. They move money, they make clearance with the money compensation, they make compensations in transactions in order to move money abroad and bring money from abroad to Brazil. And investigating this scheme, this financial crimes scheme, we discovered that one of the leaders of 4 criminal organizations that we were investigating had a connection with a former director of a huge oil company called Petrobras. I will not have the time to pass through the slides, but this is what we basically discovered. We were investigating 4 big criminal organizations led by boleiros. This is the name of the financial or money laundering agents. And then one of them had a connection with a former Petrobras director. Then we arrived at a point where we had many documents. Just in the first search warrants phase, we collected more than 80,000 documents, and we were overwhelmed with papers to analyze. At that point, we were able to offer charges of money laundering based on the predicate offense of corruption. But we were not able to offer charges of corruption themselves. We had circumstantial evidence of corruption, and we were able to charge Mr. Costa, this former Petrobras director, with charges of money laundering. And it's very hard to investigate corruption because the crime is committed within 4 walls. They have a secrecy rule. It's not for their benefit to reveal that they committed the crimes. And even when you know that they committed the crime, it's hard to prove that because the payment of the bribes are made through a lot of sophisticated operations that are money laundering operations. So we were at that point, and until the moment when Mr. Costa decided to cooperate, to make a cooperation agreement with the Federal Prosecution Office. The first search warrants phase was executed in March 17th, 2014. He decided to cooperate in August of the same year, 2014. And when he decided to cooperate, he said, well, you are investigating me because of bribes in one contract in which is involved one company. Look, it's not one contract. I received bribes in all the contracts of this company. But more than that, I received bribes in all the contracts of all the companies. But more than that, it's not only my field in Petrobras which received bribes. Also the other fields of Petrobras received bribes in all the contracts, all the big contracts. But more than that, this is the rule in all the offices of the government. This is what he revealed to us, but of course, the testimony of a corporation defendant is not enough for charging anyone or to seek a conviction. We need evidence, and we looked for evidence based on his testimony, and we were able to gather tons of evidence. We gathered them based on search warrants, which were executed. We had, up to now, about 27 phases where we executed search warrants. We also gathered a lot of evidence based on international cooperation requests. We have about 100 with about 30 different countries. And based on this evidence, we were able to charge 180 people with charges of corruption, criminal organization, and money laundering. The bribes paid amount to more than $1.5 billion. This is only the bribe amount. Anyone who paid bribes, they don't pay for nothing. They pay because they are going to get an economic benefit from that. So the harm to Petrobras is even bigger than that. And so I could say that in our first moment of our investigation, we were only looking at financial crimes. At the second moment, we were looking at bribery schemes managed within Petrobras, or about contracts that were made by Petrobras. And there was a third moment, the current moment of our investigation, where we are looking not only at Petrobras, but also at other offices of the government. This is an example of why the cooperation agreement is so important, and I chose a page of Mr. Costa's book, Agenda, where he wrote a quotation, and the quotation says, "Ending with corruption is the supreme goal of those ones who did not achieve the power yet." Of those ones who didn't achieve a government position. That is, when you achieve a government position, ending corruption is not anymore your goal. Your goal is making corruption to happen. And you can see in the other page some numbers and some letters, and it's very hard to discover what that means. But when he decided to cooperate, he clarified that the numbers stand for amounts in bribes, in millions of reais. If you want to know the number in dollars, you have to divide by 4. And the letters were the letters of the names of congressmen. And this is not evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, but this can give us a way to deepen the investigation, to look for evidence. We have had a kind of domino effect. After Mr. Costa, 40 people decided to cooperate so far. And we request from each one that he must bring new facts and new evidence so that we can make the cooperation agreement. So the investigation grew huge. This is the basic scheme that we discovered in the beginning. You have a lot of construction companies, the biggest ones in Brazil, and they were hired by Petrobras to build refineries or to reform refineries. And they were paid by that. It's very regular or normal in the construction service to hire consultancy companies or other companies, service providers, and they pay these service providers. More than that, the Petrobras directors, the managers of the huge fields within Petrobras, they were appointed politically. And that may not be the best governance policy, but that's not criminal at all. That was something that could regularly happen. So political parties indicate to the president of Brazil who they want to be in those positions, and the president will nominate those people to those positions in Petrobras. This is how things should appear if they were regular. But then we discovered that they were not regular. What we had was a collusive binding process, and the companies were able to get excessive profits, and part of these profits were paid in bribes, which were distributed among politicians, political parties, and Petrobras directors. They paid consultancy companies who were managed by money laundering agents, and these money laundering agents issued fake invoices, and then they distributed the money among the people involved. Here is the division of the bribes. 60% was given to political parties and politicians. 20% were spent in expenses, for example, with tax expenses regarding the fake invoices. 14% were given to Petrobras agents, government employees, and 6% to intermediaries, money laundering agents. This is one example of a real scheme. We offer charges regarding these schemes. We have offered so far about 36 formal charges. Each one has more than 100 pages, about 200 pages in some cases, and we describe something like this. How would you read this chart? Petrobras is on the left and the down part of the chart, and the beneficiaries of the scheme are there in the high level and on the right. And through a lot of means, the money was diverted from Petrobras. Petrobras originally hired consortiums in order to build or reform refineries. And these consortiums of companies, of construction companies, they hired consultancy services of other companies, of intermediaries. They were money laundering agents. And then these agents paid the beneficiaries, either in Brazil, or here is an example of paying in Brazil, or abroad, using offshore accounts held in fiscal havens. And sometimes they used also political donations, apparently legal donations, in order to give bribes to the politicians. This is other scheme that was described in one of the several charges. This is the way in which one of the construction companies, Odebrecht, paid Petrobras agents on the right through a lot of offshore accounts. Odebrecht was the proprietary beneficiary of these offshore accounts. They were held in Switzerland. And from these accounts, the money went to the accounts of the Petrobras agents, either directly, such as in this example, or indirectly, such as in this example, passing by Deltan and another offshore, and then coming to the offshore companies of the Petrobras directors. This is only a sample of the scheme. If we give a look at the scheme in a higher level, we will see what you are looking at this chart. The executive power, in order to govern Brazil, needs to pass bills in Congress. In order to get the support that they needed to pass bills, they accepted political nominations that were asked by Congress. So political parties and politicians went to the president and asked political appointments. They indicated persons who they would like to be directors of Petrobras, for example. And then, when the president accepts these political appointments, Congress, political parties, and politicians, they agree to approve bills. This is the way in which Brazil has worked a long time. This is a condition for governability. This is not, again, the best governance practice in the world, you know that, but it was not criminal. But the problem is that we discovered that the purpose for appointing people to public positions was to receive bribes. And that is, the value of appointments was bribes. And the bribes were used for two purposes. First, to finance very expensive political campaigns, and second, to illicit enrichment of themselves. Then we discovered that this worked not only in Petrobras, but also in other areas of the government. And we have intelligence information that this has worked even before the political party that's now in power get the power. Well, Italy had a case that was very similar to our case. It was called Clean Hands Operation. In the center of this scheme in Italy, there was also an oil company. And the bribes scheme ran in the same way as our scheme in Brazil. They paid bribes, even the amount of bribes was the same, 3%. This case was investigated in the 90s in Italy, and what we see that happened in Italy is that they reached a number of enemies so big that at some point the enemies were too strong because they discovered corruption involving too many politicians, too many political parties. And at this point, they raised, the enemies of the operation began to raise accusations of abuses. The abuses were never proven so far. Even more than 15 years later, the abuses were never proven. But the abuses were enough to diminish the public support to the case. And when that happened, the corrupt system counter-attacked. And they were able to approve a lot of acts, a lot of bills, laws that would go against the combat of corruption, that would diminish the capacity of investigating and punishing corruption. They approved a bill, for example, saying that pre-trial detention would not anymore be possible in cases of corruption. They approved that bill in the same day when Italy would play in the World Championship soccer, in the World Soccer Championship. So we have to take care in Brazil because we see that some accusations of abuses are raising right now. We have been accused of political involvement, of acting politically, as you told, and but that's a kind of conspiration theory, because we are in the case in like 13 prosecutors with no political involvement in our history. We gain nothing with accusing one or other people. We have a lot of federal police agents who work on the case. They are also career people who were not politically appointed. We have a chain of judges acting in this case, which are totally impartial. They also reached their position through public contests and not through political appointments. So there's no sense in this accusation. The reason why we are getting more people from some parties than others is this reason. If I am in the federal public prosecution office, and if I am investigating federal corruption, it is very likely that I will fight corruption in the parties that are aligned with the federal government. They will not nominate their enemies, the opposition, to the positions that they hold, right? So it's a consequence of the kind of investigation that we are making, that we are reaching corruption related to some political parties. This is an obvious thing, but they are able to raise the accusations all the time, and they are powerful people, maybe the most powerful people politically and economically in Brazil. So what they say goes to the press, and that's natural that it goes to the press, but we have to be aware of this. And along the investigations, we realized that Brazilian society was putting their hopes on us, on the team of this case. They expected Brazil to change after the car wash case. But we cannot adopt the rotten apple theory. I don't know if all of you know the rotten apple theory, but the rotten apple theory says that if you have a basket of apples and one of them is rotten, you cannot solve the problem only taking the rotten apple outside of the basket, because others, if you don't change the conditions, the reasons why that apple got rotten, others will also get rotten. So if we are to change the corruption in Brazil, we need to change the system, the conditions which favor corruption in Brazil. Then, based on studies made by Professor Paul Ackerman, here from Yale, based on studies from Professor Robert Pittgard from California, we developed some proposals, 10 proposals that would be able to change the law in order to reform the judicial system. Because the rule in Brazil, what happens all the time is impunity. We are not able to punish white-collar crimes. A study says that we punish corruption in only 3% of the cases. And even in those 3% of the cases, the person will not go to jail. The person will have to do community services or to pay a fine, and that's it. If we are to deter corruption, we need to change the system. More than that, we will need political reform. However, we from the prosecution office, we could not propose political reform because it's not the subject of our daily work, because it's not our specialty, and because it never happened that the Federal Prosecution Office offered changes in the law. So it was a very innovative what we think that we could do in Brazil in order to give a contribution to the Brazilian society. We began to think and we developed these 10 proposals regarding the judicial system, and we offered that to the society. We developed it in the car wash case in Curitiba. We took it to the General Attorney office. The General Attorney liked it, and he proposed that. And then we hoped that the Congress would love it. The Congress would say, oh, let's turn the page. There was too much corruption, let's change the environment, right? Why do you think that happened? Congress ignored our proposals. Then I was in a meeting with civil society representatives, and we had an idea. Let's collect signatures in support of this proposal. If you want to offer a bill to the Congress as a bill by public demand, we need 1,500,000 signatures in Brazil. It's very hard to get that. But we began to do that. We began to collect signatures. I made 120 lectures about the proposals, clarifying to society what were their object, the idea of the proposals, what was the reasoning which gave support to the proposals, and we were able to deliver to the Congress just now, March 29th, 2 million signatures in support of the proposals. We are really committed to do our best to change Brazil. This is something that we bring with us, and we gain nothing from that, and we really hope that we can take some good experience, we can take some good fruits from the case, from this terrible corruption that is pervasive in Brazil. Thank you. I will be available for any questions. I think that I passed my time, right? Okay. Thank you, guys.
I will seize my moderator prerogative and ask a question or two to Mr. Dallagnol. Thank you. That was so illuminating, especially the complex diagrams, which really gives you a sense of the magnitude and complexity of this operation and the incredible task it is to unravel it. I was wondering, you mentioned looking at the notebook of Mr. Costa. It seemed one example, and his point that it wasn't one contract, it wasn't several contracts that had bribes, it was every contract. I think that raised for me this general question. What was your reaction when you realized, as I think it has to be argued, that this is not an aberration, this is a general norm? And what, more generally, is your idea of justice in a context in which deviation from the law is the norm?
Okay. we already knew that corruption was a rule in Brazil because it's what the studies say about Brazil. But one thing is for you to know that there is a monster. Other thing is to look it in the eyes, right? When we saw it, we were amazed. We were, in the bad sense of amazed, we were astonished, and we were determined to do our best in order to fight corruption in that specific case. And the second question, sorry?
The second question is as a prosecutor compelled to defend in some measure a legal vision of an idea of justice, how do you do that in a context where deviation from the rule of law becomes the norm?
Okay. The problem, as you said, is not only the corruption in Brazil, is that the deviation of the norm is the rule in all fields. So thinking about changing the environment and learning from the experience of a country that changed the environment, such as Hong Kong. Hong Kong was one country where corruption was pervasive, and nowadays corruption, Hong Kong is in the ranking of international transparency, in the ranking of honesty, in the 17th position, when Brazil is in the position number 76. Hong Kong changed the environment with massive marketing against corruption. We proposed that in one of our 10 proposals, and we also proposed some programs and researches in schools and universities, and other kind of preventive ways of changing the mind of people. Because we need education in this case in order to change the environment, because it's more than simply corruption in the public service. You're absolutely right.
Great. I'll ask one more question and then hopefully we can open it up. I'm glad you mentioned coalitional presidentialism. That was something I was wondering about a lot. You mentioned that in the past, or even today, exchange of patronage for legislative votes ensures governability. And this is especially important in a system like Brazil, a political system like Brazil, where you have over 24 political parties currently in the national legislature. So for presidents, especially for President Lula and for President Rousseff, forming super coalitions of multiple parties has been an essential condition for getting a legislative agenda passed. And it's often thought that without that sort of exchange, there would be no productivity in the system. I know that one of your proposals is to criminalize unjust, illicit enrichment. My question is, there's a fine line between pork, as we call it in the United States, which nobody likes, but people accept that it's an important part of governing, and illicit enrichment. How would you propose to draw that line, and how deeply would it cut in a political system where exchange is an important norm for achieving governability?
Okay, regarding this specific proposal, the problem is that sometimes we are able to discover that the public agent has millions of dollars abroad. Those amount of dollars is totally incompatible with the salaries that he received, with a possible inheritance that he had, and but we cannot charge that people with corruption, because in order to charge the person with corruption, we have to point out which was the specific act of corruption that he committed. And for example, we discovered that the chairman, the speaker of the house in Brazil, he had millions of dollars abroad. How am I going to discover which was his corrupt act? It's impossible, because he can vote freely. He can vote to one or other direction according to his conscience. How can I go into his mind and discover in which case that he voted based on illicit purposes, illicit reasons? So this crime allows us to punish a person when his assets are much higher than the assets that he should have. He has an opportunity to present his defense, to say the source of the assets, and only if that does not happen, we will punish him. This is one of the proposals. It is recommended by the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. But we need also political reform, going to the other part of your question. We are sure that we need that, and there are some proposals in Brazil, but we could not embrace one of them, because what we did was already too much innovative for a prosecution office to do. So we hope that civil society can come with the solution for the political reform. We are incentivizing this, but we cannot act really, right now at least, regarding this.
Just a quick comment to whom I was going to ask. Please press the button of the microphone. There's a microphone in front of you because this is being recorded.
Yes, you're in the front.
Thanks for being here. It's great to have you here. I see you as much of a leader for business and society, which is very important in our school. And when I think about the picture of having government officials corrupted and also trying to shut you down, and I think that might have happened. So I'm wondering that as a leader, you have a team of people working with you, and I would just be wondering if you have been threatened by some officials, directly and indirectly, and how you kind of rally your troops to keep going and not giving up on what you feel is so important for Brazil.
Okay. The real threat that we have in this case is a threat of moral homicide, not physical homicide, because people who feel that they are injured by the investigation, that their interests are injured by the investigation, they try to defamate you in order for people to not believe in the information that you produce. So they are too high-level officers so that they could think that they could kill us and solve the problem. They know that we would be like the, I don't know if you have this expression here, but like the fly of the soup. If you kill the fly, 10 other flies will come in the place of that fly that you killed. So I think that they have this idea that if they kill any one of us, others will come in the place and will take the job. The main worry that we have is this moral problem. In order to face this problem, this defamation problem, we have brought to Brazil, for example, some judges from the Clean Hands operation in order for them to expose the experience that they had and how they lost the opportunity for good changes. To the contrary, they had bad changes based on the operation. Now in Italy, it's harder to punish corruption than before. The system is equal, but now it's harder to punish corruption. And we have as a head of the group, of the prosecutors group, my role is to try to protect the investigation and to try to develop new ideas as entrepreneur, as you would make here, in order to make the case stronger. We developed not only the 10 proposals, but we also had the first internet website of a criminal case in Brazilian history, so that people can go there and in a transparent way look at each formal charges that we offer. They have also the key for the electronic access to the process. They can go to the justice website with the key and they can consult all the procedures that they want to. This is a way in which we think we can reach transparency in this case.
Thanks a lot for your time. You mentioned that your proposals were ignored by the Congress, but there are different parties in Brazil. So has there been a case where there were some other parties who were not ruling at the moment, but came to support you or start speaking against the ruling government?
Yeah, I would say that we have probably about 50 out of 500 congressmen who will at least expressly support our projects. We will try to get support of other ones based on the public support, based on the signatures. But the problem is that those other parties, if they do not have the power in the federal government, many of them have the power in the state governments. And these schemes of corruption are not restricted to the federal level. I'm sure that they are widespread in the state level and municipal level too.
Yes.
you. Well, the mic doesn't work here, so thanks so much for making time to speak to us. We saw the flag of Panama on your slide, so how do you think the release of Panama Papers will help your investigation? And more broadly, if you can speak about cooperation with Swiss and Panama governments, how did you interact with them? Thank you.
That's great. The Panama Papers probably will not help us because they would be considered illicit evidence in Brazil. In order for you some evidence, some piece of evidence, we need to prove that that piece of evidence was gathered in a licit way. And I do not think that's the case in the Panama case. I think that was a leaking from the bank or something like that. I would have to have some evidence about origin of the evidence. And but cooperation with Switzerland has gone very, very well. Switzerland is impressing the world in this investigation. They are making a parallel investigation in the car wash case. We are exchanging information all the time, but they have their own cases. They are investigating more than 1,000 accounts related to our case. They are transferring information all the times that they can, and without them we would not have advanced so far as we have done. And regarding Panama, we have a strange case of cooperation because we sent a cooperation request that was very urgent, that occurred in 2015 June. And then I talked to the prosecutor. He said to me, "Oh, I will gather the papers if it's urgent. I'm going to gather the papers. You have it in 3 days." Then he gathered the papers, he sent to his central authority, and it stopped there. They didn't send us. We called, we asked, we begged, we did everything that we could do, and now we received some intelligence information that maybe some very important people could be involved in those accounts in Panama. Very important people from Panama involved in those accounts, so that would explain why we didn't receive the documents yet.
Thank you.
Pedro.
You guys already discussed a little bit that. So you guys already discussed about how pervasive corruption is in Brazil, and you focus a lot on the political system. And I wonder, and being from Brazil, I know that for you to, if you're a company, you want to build a building in São Paulo, for instance, sometimes you need to bribe the municipality and the city official to get permission for you to build there. My question is, how can we make corruption and build compliance systems in organizations and everything else for us to start, stopping this pervasive kind of behavior within companies and organizations in Brazil?
Yeah, we have had recently an anti-corruption act in Brazil. It is from 2013, and it stimulates the creation of compliance fields within a company, of a compliance section. And but more than that, we because that already exists, what we advanced thinking about this kind of situation, these small cases of corruption, was to advance integrity tests. It's very interesting because these integrity tests, they are like tests that are made in order to see how a public agent would behave when he is before a situation where somebody offers some bribe to him. And based on his response to that situation, to which he should be prepared, we will punish or not punish him. It's interesting because here in the United States, ABC News made a kind of integrity test in the 60s, and they had 31 wallets containing money and the ID of somebody, and they distributed it to police officers in Miami as if the wallets had been found on the ground. And 1/3 of the wallets was not delivered to the final owner, or was given back but with less money than it had. Well, 30 years later, ABC repeated the test in 2 other cities, New York City and Los Angeles. Cities where police had a lot of problems with corruption. They had commissions to investigate corruption there, and they implemented integrity tests there for a long period. Then they distributed 20 wallets in each city, and every wallet was given back with all the money to the proprietor of the wallet. That shows how the integrity tests may change behavior. In the case of fiscals, of government agents who should look at licenses, we could implement also this kind of test so that we could separate the people who have been doing this kind of illicit business for a long time from people who have honest behavior.
In the back?
Thank you so much for being here, Deltan. My question is a little bit about politics. So there's a rumor right now in Brazilian media that if President Dilma is to be impeached and Vice President Temer is to take power, an agreement to finish the investigations will be pursued by the new president. However, the Attorney General of Brazil has publicly stated that such a thing is an illusion. So my question for you is, first of all, what's your personal opinion, professional opinion regarding this topic? And second, if you could elucidate some of the channels through which the executive power can influence such an independent investigation.
Okay. There are not a lot of means by which they can influence the investigation. They can maybe talk to a Supreme Court justice, they can hire the best lawyers, they can try to influence the decisions, but and we have seen that they have tried to do that so far. We had, I will tell, but because maybe most of people don't know that here, at least the non-Brazilians will not know, but we have wiretapped the former President Lula, and he talked to a lot of important people saying that they should stop the investigation. Although he did that on the phone, when he and his party's member would talk to the public, they would say, we have to preserve the investigation, this is an independent investigation, we will not touch it. But under the scene, they were trying to stop us. Well, I don't think that a change in the political landscape in Brazil will change this. I think that anyone who is there will try to stop the investigation by all the possible means that they have. If there is impeachment, the vice president is one possible target of the investigation before the Supreme Court. If there is the impeachment of the vice president, the speaker for the Senate is investigated in this case. If there is the impeachment of this guy, the other one, the speaker for the House of Representatives, he has criminal actions against him already in this case, criminal charges. So we are not in a very good landscape in this case. We have a lot of enemies, the number of enemies is increasing every day, and it's very likely that we are going to have a situation such as the Italian situation, where they will raise and continue raising accusations of abuse. One of the accusations, for example, is the accusation that we use pre-trial arrests in order to extract confessions from the defendants through cooperation agreements. But more than 75% of our cooperation agreements were made with people who were never arrested. That makes no sense, the accusation of abuse. More than that, we never sought a defendant in order to get a cooperation agreement. All the times, in every single case, it was a defendant, through his lawyer, who sought us in order to get the cooperation agreement as a defense strategy. That makes no sense, the abuse accusation, but they are very good in what they do. They make the abuse accusations stick. That happened also in Italy. And we have some good differences from Italy. Because in Italy, a half of the press was public, was owned by the government, and the other half of it was owned by Berlusconi, one of the targets of the investigation. So they were just smashed by the press. And in Brazil we have a freer a press, and we hope that we can resist at least additional time. But we will do our best. If society is together with us, if we are able to pass those 10 proposals, if we are maybe capable of advancing political reform, then maybe we can have a better country for us and future generations.
Blue sweater? David?
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I think that every Brazilian's hope with this investigation is for corruption to be punished. But recent wiretaps and other corporations have shown that the political system also influences the Supreme Court justice nominations, and there is even one very clear case of that. Do you think that is you should take any action in the sense, or how do you think is your role given this evidence of maybe you pressing charges, but in the Supreme Court it also being as corrupt as a political system, for example?
That's a tough question, because it touches with the limit of our action. We don't have a lot to do about that. We know that they will try to stop us in every possible way. We don't have, we have some evidence that possibly one of the justices of the third instance court was tainted by influence in his decisions, but we don't have evidence regarding our Supreme Court. And they are the powerful ones, the justices. We don't have a lot to do if they decide to give a corrupt decision. It's very hard. We will have to have evidence, but we will probably not have this evidence that we will need. So this would be a limitation of our system. Because at the end, our system is made of humans.
Thanks. I have one comment and one question. The first comment is that I'm from China. Hong Kong is not a country, it's a part of China. The question is, China and Brazil, we are from the BRICS country, both are like the emerging markets. My question would be, because you refer to like the US, Hong Kong and other areas of the world, so to your self-perception, is it like the inevitable characteristics of the emerging markets to have these similar corruption problems? Yeah, thank you.
Your question is whether I think that this corruption is a characteristic of emerging markets.
Emerging markets, which means that it is like inevitable, and we need to go through this stage to reach the next stage of our economic growth and even the political development.
Okay, I would not say that, because when we look at the conditions which favor corruption, based on Susie Rose Ackerman, I could put there 8 conditions, and each country will have its own flaws, its own gaps in the system against corruption. Our gaps in Brazil are particularly in the 4th point and in the 8th point. We have a serious problem in our justice system, which produces impunity all the time. And we have a political system which favors corruption, because we have more than 20 political parties, we have difficulties to form coalition, we have very expensive electoral campaigns which demand for money all the time. There is a pressure for getting money even from illegal sources. So I would guess that our problems in Brazil would be these ones, but I would have to know the reality of other countries in order to comment them.
Yes.
Hi, and congratulations for your job. I am a federal judge in Brazil, so I know it very well. Congratulations, a great job. And I'm curious to know about your opinion, your forecast about the trial that will be held on next Thursday. if our Supreme Court will let Dilma Rousseff appoint Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as a minister in order to hamper your efforts to try him.
Okay. Just to give some background, we along the wiretap that we had in Brazil, in the very last day of the wiretap, after the judge decided that the wiretap should stop, then President Dilma herself called Lula, who was our target, and said, "Oh, I'm sending you the appointment term paper, but use it only in the case of an emergency." What's the background of this? When we can investigate Mr. Lula because he is not politically appointed to any higher position. But if he signed that term, we would not be able to investigate him in Curitiba, where I work. Only the Supreme Court could investigate him. So if somebody went there, for example, to arrest him, he could sign the term and present, "No, you cannot arrest me, only the Supreme Court decision." So it was a scandal in Brazil, this call, and now people challenged his nomination as to a high-level position, saying that it was tainted. The purpose of the nomination was to protect him from the investigation and not to really, when the purpose was not really for him to exercise that position. And this Supreme Court justice said that the nomination was tainted, but this Supreme Court justice is famous because he's from the right-wing ideological position, and now he's taking this decision to the court to decide. I have no idea what's going to happen. Anyway, if it stays there, or if it comes back to us, if he is kept out of the position, I think that his destiny will not change a lot. Because we have very good colleagues who are working together with the General Attorney, and they have the same plans as we have. Either there or in Curitiba, probably he is going to be prosecuted based on the evidence that we have collected so far.
Sorry, we have time for one more question over here.
Thank you for being here, Deltan. I have a question, I guess, regarding Rose Ackerman, point number 6. I was just wondering, do you think, in the case of Brazil, if perhaps decreasing the size of the states would help fight corruption?
Excuse me, could you repeat this?
If in the case of Brazil, perhaps if we decrease the size of the states, if that would help fight corruption?
I think that's a very difficult question. I would say that we will need a lot of reforms which could, in fact, diminish corruption, involving, for example, the requirements for licenses, some tax issues which are very complicated in Brazil. We could make it much more straight, but that would not be very easy reform because the taxes, the fees are divided in benefit of a lot of different governments. It's very hard to make a change like that in Brazil. And I will not say that that would be our main problem today. First, we have major problems in those two other areas. And regarding transparency, just take advantage of your question. Regarding the first point, we have a very nice project in Brazil that is developed by the Federal Prosecution Office, not by me, but by other colleagues in our office. They ranked all the governments in Brazil, the state governments, the municipalities, and the federal government websites on transparency based on objective criteria. There is a software which ranks all day, and based on the grade that's given by the system, we made recommendations to more than 1,000 governments so that they improve their system, their webpage on transparency, and if they do not do so, we'll take legal action against them. This is something that we could do regardless of any change in the law. It's a good project too.
Okay, thank you. Sorry that we're out of time. Please join me in thanking Mr. Dallagnol.